So today we're going to demo using ArcGIS Online. This is going to help you tremendously in Lab 5 where we are asking you to use this tool, ArcGIS Online, to create a basic map of some topic of interest of yours. And what I'm going to do is demo a few different ways that you can load your data into this tool, ArcGIS Online. Now you don't have to watch the entire demo because I'm going to be working with different kinds of data sets. So pay attention to the one that seems most relevant for the data that you want to work with. You do not have to use the data sets I will show, but you certainly can if you would prefer to. You are free to work with any sort of data in this assignment to map any kind of data that you like. I am going to draw on some of our existing data sets, like the Toronto robberies, in order to make an online web map. Given the circumstances we find ourselves in, it's really nice to be able to do GIS on the web. So far in the semester, we've been working with ArcGIS, doing GIS on our desktops, in the Hut Lab, on our laptops. And that's all well and good, but sometimes we want to do GIS in the internet. We're already so connected to the internet. Why aren't we doing GIS online? And over the past few years, companies such as Esri, the makers of ArcGIS, have started to move these tools online. So we're going to look at what's called ArcGIS Online, the basic version of this tool, and see how we can make maps using it. Now the first thing that you want to be able to do is, or that you need to do to access this, is to create an account with Esri. Okay, so if you just Google ArcGIS, online account, or click on the link I provided you in the lab, you'll be able to create an account. And it's very painless, it's free, and that will allow you to save and share the web map that we create at the end of the day. Right now I'm at arcgis.com /home/index.html. And the way we access ArcGIS Online is just by clicking Map here. And this will take us to what's known as ArcGIS Online. And it will load a basic base map for us. Okay, so here we are in Canada. It's got some, some topographic components to the base map here. This is a slippy map, so we can drag it around using our cursor. The tiles are loading. As we move across the map, you can actually see the outlines of the different images that constitute the base map as we scroll along. But this is what we have. Of course, we also have a web Mercator projection. Very similar to the Mercator projection, and we can tell that's the case just by looking at Greenland and how big it is. Okay, and so this should seem fairly familiar to you. If you've ever gone to Google Maps or whatever, you've interacted with a map like this that has a base map that you can zoom in and out on, that you can even locate yourself on if you have location enabled. I do not have location enabled on my laptop, okay? But if you're using this on your mobile phone, you can press that button and give Esri the permission to track you. And we also have, much as we might in ArcGIS or ArcMap, we have our kind of table of contents over here. This actually is just kind of how to use the map. This is the content. So this is kind of like that layers list, the data frame list in ArcMap. Right now, the only contents we have is that topographic map that is showing us a little bit about elevation around the world. Okay, but what we will be doing is adding thematic data to this map, okay? And of course, we have no legend yet because we really don't have anything to show other than the base map. Now, you can change the base map if you like, depending on the topic that you'll be mapping. Okay, you've got a bunch of different options here, just as you do in ArcMap, actually, on your desktop. You can change whatever kind of base map fits your purposes. For what we'll be looking at, which I'm going to start by showing the Toronto robberies, I am going to use this base map, a dark gray canvas, okay? Because we've got to kind of, we don't need all the topography to know anything or to, it's irrelevant to the robbery rate in Toronto. We don't need all that information. And it's kind of a stark theme, robberies and crimes. So we're going to go with this one. And so now we have to add our data. Okay, so we can search for layers that have already been uploaded to ArcGIS from other users. We can add layers that a website might make available and provide you the link to. But mostly what we're going to do is add a layer from file. That is, we're going to upload a shapefile or another kind of geospatial data format file to our map. Okay, but before we get there, we have to go get that data. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to be working with the Toronto robberies data that we've been playing around with in lab 4. Okay, so I went ahead and pulled up that dashboard or that web map. And so we've all seen this before if we went through lab 4. Okay, and we have here the city, the different police districts, so on and so forth. And I'm going to go ahead and click out of this. And what I really want to pay attention to is this button right here, location analysis. So I click on that. It's going to give me this little pop-up menu that I'm going to move to the side right now. That is going to let me sort of filter through all the major crime data that the police service has. So I'll click on that. And this is like what we're going to do here to download our data is essentially do a kind of like search by attributes and search by location or spatial query of the data. Okay, so this is, again, it's kind of like a search by attribute and search by location. I want to pause before we do this and just note that, look at where we're at. We're at arcgis.com/apps web app viewer. This map that the Toronto Police Service has put together is actually built on the backs of ArcGIS Online, a more advanced version than you or I have access to, but at its very core, it is ArcGIS Online. Okay, so you'll be seeing, if you haven't already, lots of websites actually that offer web maps using ArcGIS, okay? Including one of the most famous coronavirus mapping dashboards, the Johns Hopkins dashboard uses ArcGIS behind the scenes to display all that information. All right, back to Toronto robberies. So we need to give it our query criteria. So let's say we want to map robberies. That's the major crime we're interested in. We want to select the dates that these occurred. We really don't need anything all the way back to 2014. So let's go all the way to 2019, and let's just say start of April. Why not? Between April and December. This is actually going to give us fairly similar data to the kinds that you worked with in Lab 4. The same date frame. And we will go ahead and apply that. And it might take a while. So the problem here, so it did display some information to us. The problem is it didn't give us that search by location functionality that we wanted. So it is showing us the robberies that occurred between April of last year and December of last year. But it didn't let us search by location for that, which is actually okay, because we want all of Toronto anyway. So pardon my hesitation, this should actually do the trick. Now we have some options, so sorry about that hiccup. Usually it should let you kind of define a particular area that you want to search. I don't know why it's not doing that right now. But nonetheless, we're interested in data for all of the city of Toronto anyway, so we are good. You know what though, I'm going to be a bit more picky about the time frame I want this data for. So I'm going to go back to the filter data, and I'm going to do just like half of last year, just to have it be a bit more precise. So July, August, September, October, November, December, 6 months. So what it's doing behind the scenes is going back to the database on some server somewhere and pulling all of the data that fit the criteria. That is, that have an occurrence date between July 1st of last year and December 31st of last year. Now, in the results that opens up, what we want to do is click on this little dot, 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 and that is going to allow us to export our data. So everything, all the dots that are on here representing robberies in the city of Toronto for the selected time frame, we're going to export that. Now you have a few different options for how to export this data. So you can export it to a CSV, and that may or may not have the latitude and longitude for each point, which we need in order to map it, of course. We'll go ahead and export that and just see what happens. And hopefully my menu thing doesn't go too far away. Just to go back to the ArcGIS Online, the map we're creating over here, one thing to keep in mind is that when we do add that layer to our table of contents, when we do add our data to our map, these are the kinds of data that it will accept. It will accept a shapefile, of course, because shapefiles are Esri's proprietary format. It's what we usually work with in ArcGIS when we're working with vector data. It will take a CSV as long as that CSV has location data of one sort or the other in it. And it will take GeoJSON, which we are learning, and that open standard format for geographical features. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now let's go back over here, and what I do want to do is actually, I want to move this little window out of my way. Let's see if it'll do that. There it goes. I'm going to download this or export this as GeoJSON. So we export that, and it's down there in our downloads. And we're done here. We have all the data we need, and we can go back to our map here and add it. So we go to add this little button. It looks very similar to the yellow button with the plus sign in ArcMap. Add layer from file, choose that file, and I'm going to just load up that GeoJSON. Okay, so I'm going to select features.geojson and open that, and I am going to import that layer. Now I would open the GeoJSON file in my text editor and show you a little bit about what that looks like, but it's going to be so big that it's not going to be really all that visible, intelligible anyway. And voila! ArcGIS Online can process that GeoJSON format It doesn't just work with shapefiles. We can use the GeoJSON format, and we get this nice little cake sprinkle coloring of robberies throughout the city of Toronto. Now, what is it doing? What has ArcMap or ArcGIS Online done for us? Well, it has loaded in our data, and it's also gone to the next step of trying to figure out how we want to symbolize it. So it's trying to be a little smart for us. It is choosing for us a kind of, well, don't you want to symbolize this attribute? And maybe you do, but you have the option of choosing one of the other attributes in that data set to visualize, okay? So you could, right now it is showing us the premise type, but of course we could choose the offense type. And we'd get, robbery, mugging, robbery, home invasion, all the different types. So it really just depends on what part of your data you want to show. I'm actually going to go back to premise type. And, we have a couple of options here. So we can use what are called unique symbols to represent this data. Because remember, when we're talking about robbery the premise location type of a robbery, this is categorical qualitative information. Was it a business? Was it an apartment? Was it a house? Was it outside? These are all qualitatively or categorically different things. So we need to use symbols that are categorically different. And color gives us a nice variable to make those distinctions between outside, commercial, apartment, house. Now we have some options here. And clicking on options kind of opens up that little you could think of this as the symbology, menu, a little bit, the layer properties and then symbology tab within ArcMap. So we can click here and, change the symbol for the outside places. We could, make it, we could even choose our own image. We can make it a star. We could give it a different color or fill. We can make it more transparent. There are lots of options available to us to give us something different than just this cake sprinkle kind of map here. And I'm not going to go through all of that, but definitely for the maps you make, you should try not to use the default, because this is not particularly easy to read. Some of the colors blend together a little too much. Okay. There's other things we can do here. Set the entire transparency of the layer, if we thought that made sense. Okay. And we can also just show the actual location here. Okay, so if we were just interested in, well, where are the robberies, we can just show that location. No attribute, just where are the robberies. Okay, and change some information about that. So we can call it done with that, and then it ends up in our contents. Again, our table of contents here. So we've got our canvas, but then we've got these new features. We can turn them on and off just like we would any other layer in ArcMap. We can put the legend up or show the legend here just as in ArcMap. We can open the attribute table just like in ArcMap, except in the same pane. We can change the symbolization, and we can actually cluster points. This is actually a pretty handy tool. So ArcMap will automatically cluster some of these robberies, these points representing robberies for us. Okay, it is aggregating this point-based data for us, not by any polygon-based enumeration unit, but just kind of saying in this general vicinity, how many different kinds of how many robberies are there? And where this can be really useful, this clustering feature, is when we have different attributes we want to show. So let's go back to premise type. and it'll change, and we have unique symbols, again, representing, was the robbery outside, was it an apartment, so on and so forth. And what we can do is show clustering of different kinds, so by neighborhood. So if we choose to kind of cluster less, we certainly generalize. That is to say, we're still reducing the number of robberies that are shown on the map. That is what clustering is. It's a form of generalization. We now have maybe 60 points on the map instead of 1,000 or 2,000 even. And what this is showing us is that for each kind of area or neighborhood in the city, how many robberies were there? We can kind of see some patterns there, like, yeah, as we know, downtown, lots of robberies. Yeah, out here, some robberies, yep. But then also, what is the most common premise type in that neighborhood? And that is going to vary across the city. So there's some spatial analysis kinds of things that we can do in ArcGIS Online that we would normally do in ArcMap. We don't lose all the functionality when we go from ArcMap to ArcGIS Online. We just have to kind of reconfigure and figure out what is available to us. So if we load up the legend here, we can see that most robberies, at least where these red dots are, were outside, but there are some neighborhoods where the most common kind of robbery was in an apartment or even in businesses, okay? So it tells us a little bit about our data and its spatial patterns. Now, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to share this map. Then I'm going to move on to uploading other forms of data, okay? I can use the share button here in order to start setting up this map and making it visible to the public. Right now it's only visible to me. I can't share this with you. I have to enable ArcGIS Online to do that. And it's not very hard. Again, you need an account, you need to be logged in, and you need to click the share button. And you need to save it first, okay? So I'm gonna go to save. And since I haven't saved it yet, it's gonna ask me for a title, and I'm gonna call this TO Robberies. It's gonna force you to put some tags in here for whatever reason. I'll just tag YYZ. It doesn't matter how you tag it. It doesn't, nobody really cares. It's saved to my account. And there we go, the name has changed up here. Now I can click on share and share it. Now, as part of the assignment, we are asking you to give us the link and also to embed it in a web page that you will share with us, which means that you have to make it visible to everyone. Now, nobody's going to stumble upon whatever map you're making except the TAs and I. So it's okay to share it, but I do have to say, don't put too personal of information. Don't map that, of course. Don't share anything that you wouldn't want to share with the entire world. Okay, most of the data you'll be working with is already public data, so it's okay, but just keep that in mind. Now you get a couple of different options here that we want from you for the assignment. A link, and this is a kind of short link. So if I take that link and I open it in a tab, it takes me to the map. Takes a while to load, but it will load. And yep, here's our map. I could add to that map, tells me who made it, so on and so forth. okay? And I can also embed this in a website. Now, this is kind of the really cool part. You could create a web page, and this is what we're asking you to do in the assignment. We are giving you the kind of default HTML, which is the code, the programming language that comprises most every page on the internet. And this is that HTML code, and it is code that allows you to share your map on that web page. So, you don't have to give it just a link to the map that somebody has to click on and then go to ArcGIS Online. It can actually just be a part of your entire web page, okay, with this code. Now you have some options before you share it. So you can choose theme, you can, disable scrolls. There's lots of different options here that you can play around with. But the key thing is that you copy this and embed it in that HTML file that we shared with you as part of the assignment, okay? So I'm done there, and I would copy that and paste it into my file, okay? So at this point, I've given you an example of how to access data and how to upload it and to ArcGIS Online and how to adjust some of the parameters. I encourage you to explore more about how you would maybe pre-process some of your data so that it's showing the world what you want to show, the pattern you want to show. And I also encourage you to explore a bit more of the different options available to you in ArcGIS Online. I am going to go ahead and create a new map by hopefully doing this. And I'm going to start all over from scratch. And I am going to download some other data and show that to you. Now, if you're having problems, if you want to work with Toronto robberies, which is fine, or any other Toronto crime, and you're having problems with this website, which is totally understandable, it's a little slow, there is another way to access that data. And you can just Google Toronto Police Service data, robbery data, and that will bring you, it'll show you the map from the Toronto Police Service that we've been working with, but it will also show you this site, which is just another robbery specific view of the data. And it's still got a map, but it also just has other ways of accessing the data. So if I click on data here, it's showing me the spreadsheet or attribute table of the data. And I can also download it, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and download that. I'm going to, maybe change the date again just to get that July through December range. Okay. And that gives me 1800 or so, which is great. That's what I wanted. And when I click download over here, it's going to let me download all this. Now you can download it as a spreadsheet, okay, and that should work as long as it's a CSV, or you can convert it to a CSV because it has the lat and long here of each robbery. We can also just download this straight as a shape file, okay? And that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to download the filtered data set, the one that's only showing me July through December. And I'm going to download that as a shape file. And just like as I share with you shape files in a zip format, it is going to download my shape files in a zip format. And why is it not actually downloading? Let's refresh this page. Oh, there it goes. A little bit of a delay, but now we've downloaded those, a couple copies of those shapefiles, okay? So now I'm going to go back to ArcGIS Online, go to Add Data again, Add Layer from File, and this time I'm going to choose a shapefile, and I'm going to choose a zip, a compressed version of all the files that comprise a shapefile, right? Database, so on and so forth. Database file, the actual shapefile, the projection file, so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to upload that zip of the robberies. And it gives me a couple of options. It says generalized features for web display. That's going to remove some of the points. It's going to basically cluster them, as we saw in the earlier part of the demo. I want to keep all those robberies, so I'm going to keep original features. And voila, same thing. ArcGIS knows what's up. It knows where my data is. It loads it in automatically. This time it's a little less smart about what I might want to actually map. This is just showing me some index variable. I don't even know what that means. I could go to the metadata and find out what index means, but that's not really what I want to map. I think it's a fairly meaningless attribute. Again, we have more or less the same data here. Premise type, kind of offense, so on and so forth, all right? And I can, again, choose the same options. Now, what I want to show you in this time is, again, if we just want to show where these robberies occurred, we can do that. We can just show the location, and here we are. But ArcGIS Online gives us the option of creating a heat map. Okay, so that's one of the things that we try to do in Lab 4 to show kind of the prevalence of robberies across a certain area, kind of interpolate where robberies were most dense. And we used a buffer analysis to do that, a very crude kind of approximation of a heat map. ArcGIS can do that, Online can do that a little bit better. Okay, so this is their rendering of a heat map of robberies in Toronto. Okay, so a kind of clear hot spot in downtown, not unexpected given this is the hub of the city where people are working, coming into work every day, where people are hanging out and shopping, on the weekends, so on and so forth. But maybe some sort of neighborhood hotspots, these little darkish red-brown areas across the city as well. And some areas just where, robbery hasn't been reported as much, okay? So that's available to us as well from this point data. All right, so again, I would mess around with the heat map options here. I could change the color scale if I wanted to really pull out that one kind of cluster. I could change some of the attributes here if I thought that each robbery kind of indicated an area was crime dense. That each robbery was indicative of a large area of crime nearby, then I could sort of drag the cursor all the way over here, and yes, then the heat map would suggest more of the city is crime ridden, as indicated by these different robberies. But if I think each kind of little robbery doesn't have a kind of big area of influence, that doesn't indicate that maybe there are unreported robberies nearby, that doesn't really suggest a wide prevalence of robbery nearby, then I could decrease that area of influence. Essentially, what this is asking us is, how much do we believe the first law of geography applies to robberies in this case? So remember, the first law of geography is, everything is related, but near things are more related than further things. Do we think each robbery is, going to have a an impact on a robber on crime, 2 kilometers away, then maybe we'll choose this larger area of influence. If we think each robbery maybe only has an impact on the surrounding few blocks, then maybe we choose a smaller area of influence. Okay, so that's just a little bit more about the heat map, a little bit of a tangent. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this, and I'm just going to drop the data here, and I'm going to walk us through just one more way of loading data into ArcGIS Online. Okay, so some of you might be interested in mapping some of the data that we have on coronavirus. Okay, now I shared a couple of links. I shared the global data set that is being made available, and you will have to work a little bit to make that in the right format to share online through ArcGIS. What I'm going to work with is simply the Government of Canada's data. So the Government of Canada, if you just search for this is like their main coronavirus webpage. They have data by province. Okay, so ultimately the data are reported at the public health district level. I don't know if that's publicly available, or where to find it, or where to find it for the entire country. If we want data for across the country, we're going to have to get it at the provincial level. Okay, so this is showing us that data for the provinces and territories. And we're just going to copy and paste this to create our own spreadsheet that we can upload to ArcGIS Online. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this and pull it into a spreadsheet. So I'm just going to copy and paste. My wheels are going to spin, and we have this. Okay, the province or territory. We have number of confirmed cases, probable cases, deaths. Now, this is all well and good. We might be interested in, since we know some of these provinces are more populous than others, we might actually be interested in normalizing this data. Remember that normalizing is simply putting our data into a derived form, creating a rate, a percentage, a ratio out of these total data that we have. Now we could map this, that would be fine. We could map this using proportional symbols, of course. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but we do know that what might be more interesting at this point is what percentage of each province's population has been infected. So I just pulled up some data on each province and territory's population as estimated by StatCan for this time, very recent data. And again, I'm just going to copy and paste this, okay? And I'm just going to drop it in here. And it's not in a very nice format, as you can tell. Okay, I'm going to try one more thing to make it in a prettier format, and it's not going to work for me. So what I'm just going to do is just go in by province and copy and paste by hand. So bear with me. I'm going to create a column here called population. I'm just going to drop this in really quick. Okay, PEI. You will learn a lot about each province and its population as you do this. New Brunswick. Feel free to skip forward in this part of the video. This is the unfortunate reality of the life of a GIS analyst, is sometimes the data just aren't quite in an accessible format and you've got to do some work by hand. Okie doke. So now we can, we've got a little bit of more meaningful information here. So we can create a category called percent that just we'll use to calculate the percent of each province that has been infected and experienced COVID. And that's just this first column by the population. We'll multiply that by 100 just to get the percent. And it's a very small number, okay? We have multiplied by 100, and this is a good thing, right? It's a very small percentage of each population. That is like 1 in 9,000 people, or something like that, in British Columbia, okay? And that is don't quote me on that. That might not be the right way to put it. But at any rate, this is a very small percentage, okay? But it's also something that varies across province, right? So, if we sorted these by the percent, from least to most, we would see actually that infection rates are higher in a province like BC than here in Ontario, where we have a relatively low infection rate, okay? So the next step for us here is to save the data. So I will go to File and Save As, and remember we want to save this as a CSV. That's the kind of file that ArcGIS is going to recognize. Okay, so instead of Excel workbook, I'm going to choose CSV, comma delimited. I'm just going to call this COVID.csv. I'm going to save it. And it'll give you all these things. Don't worry about this, at least not yet. And I'm going to close out of that. Now I'm going to come back to ArcGIS Online, add a layer from the file I have. Again, CSV is good, so I'm going to choose that file. Here it is. And what's magical here is that, remember that I didn't provide any coordinates for those provinces in the CSV. We just have the name of the province, which is not spatial information per se. But luckily, ArcGIS Online is smart enough to help us figure out where we're trying to map. So we can locate the features in our data, in this case by place name. So we know that they're in Canada, okay? And in particular, we want to use this field in our spreadsheet, in our database file, because this contains the name of the province and territory. And we know that it's not an address, it's not a city, it is in fact the name of province. So this is going to help ArcGIS just make sure that we are actually putting our data in the right spot on the map. So we add our layer, and ta-da, we are in the right spot on the map. And again, ArcGIS Online is smart enough to know that we probably want to be mapping, say, percent. It's one of the key numerical pieces of information that was given to us, or that we had in the spreadsheet, okay? And again, it gives us different options for how we want to represent that. Now, since this is actually quantitative data, as opposed to just location and qualitative data that we're looking at with the Toronto robberies, we have a few more options to us. So right now we're showing the more of population that is infected, the bigger the circle, okay, and that's fine. Some other things that we can do here is simply change the range of the data. So we go to options, we can change sort of the small circle. So as we're doing this, we're finding we're kind of losing provinces, just switching them to the really small circle. Okay, if we just want to map, what are the above average provinces? This here meaning average percent infected. Then we could just do this. And there are still symbols that show up for the below average places, but we've rescaled our map here, okay? So it's a little bit complex. We can also change the size, the minimum size of each one, and so on and so forth. All the kinds of parameters or options available to you in the Layout Properties and Symbology tab within ArcMap. But guess what? We can also classify our data. I told you we're not gonna ever get away from classification. Okay, here it is again in ArcGIS Online. Now, currently, we are classifying our data with the natural breaks for classes. Let's do a quantile approach where we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different quantiles, each with the same number of provinces in them that indicate sort of the top 25% of province or territories in terms of percent infected, the sort of middle two quartiles, and then the bottom 25%. Okay, so just even by looking at this, we can tell, okay, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC, they have they're the three here with the biggest circles. They have the highest infection rates. They're in the top quartile. These three here. Okay. So that's available to us, right? And we can look at that in the legend here. We didn't even need to actually create the percentage column or field in the spreadsheet. We can actually do that on our map. So if we just chose, let's say we wanted to actually, instead of looking at confirmed cases, actually look at deaths. Okay, so we can choose that attribute, go to size, and if we wanted to still normalize that data, we can divide it by the population, and that gives us the same result. Again, way, way, way small numbers here, because again, we're only talking about a very small number of deaths divided by a very big population. But again, what stands out here is the differences between the provinces. So again, I encourage you, no matter what data you are working with, to explore the options available to you in ArcGIS Online and that I've demoed here today. There are more that I haven't that can help you not only show the data and the patterns in it, but also just make sure that your design is appropriate for your topic and makes your map easy to read for your audience. Okay, so just one example of what I mean by that is, there's no again, we're mapping coronavirus here. There's no reason that we need a topographical base map. Topography has nothing to do with the virus. So we might choose a different base map, something a bit more appropriate for the theme, right? So this dark gray base map maybe makes the situation seem quite grave, but perhaps more appropriate than the topographical base map. And in fact, if you do visit the Johns Hopkins University dashboard, this is the base map they use, and this is the symbolization approach they take. And they are also working with ArcGIS Online. Again, a much more advanced version than what we have available to us, but it's ultimately the same thing at the end of the day. Okay, so thank you for your time and attention. And if you went into this demo while we were in the middle of the rest of the lecture, I look forward to meeting you back there.